The 3rd century was an age of fear. Rome seemed eternal, yet cracks ran beneath its marble face. The emperors Diocletian and Maximian sought unity through terror. They ordered all citizens to worship the gods of old, or be branded as traitors to the empire. Across the provinces, incense burned in temples. Altars dripped with sacrifice. Crowds bowed before Jupiter and Mars, whispering words they no longer believed. And above them all hung silence, the silence of fear. In Hispania, in the proud city of Emerita Augusta, there lived a girl named Eulalia. She was 12 years old. Her family was noble, her faith unshaken. Though her body was frail and her face still childlike, her spirit burned like fire. Her parents tried to guard her. "Remain hidden," they pleaded. "The prisons are crowded. The executioners never rest. Do not draw their gaze." But Eulalia's heart was restless. She could not bear to see Christ mocked while she remained silent. One winter night she rose from her bed. The house lay still, her parents asleep. She took a plain wool cloak, no sandals for her feet. The stones bit cold against her skin, yet she did not falter. She stepped into the dark streets, and the stars seemed to follow her. The city slept, but she walked swiftly. Her hair, unbound, streamed in the wind. She carried no food, no coin, no token of comfort. She carried only her faith. Not away from danger, but straight towards it. At dawn she came to the forum. The tribunal stood ready, with its marble steps and iron-helmed guards. There, Governor Dacian sat in judgment. Before him stood the altar of sacrifice. On it incense smoldered, waiting to prove the loyalty of the people. Men and women approached one by one. A pinch of incense cast into the flames, a bow before the idols, and they were dismissed. Some left pale with shame, others calm with relief. But all left free. Then the doors opened, and silence fell. Into the chamber walked a child. Barefoot, small, her cloak wrapped tight against the cold. The soldiers frowned. Some scoffed. But her eyes did not waver. She walked to the center of the hall. The governor stared in astonishment. At last he asked, "Who are you, child?" And she answered clearly. "I am Eulalia, servant of Christ." The word struck the hall like a hammer. Even the guards lowered their eyes. The governor tried a softer voice, hoping to bend her. "Offer but a few grains of incense to Caesar, and you shall go free. You are young. Do not throw your life away." But the girl lifted her head, her voice ringing like a blade. "These idols are nothing but stone and wood. You worship shadows and lies. I bow only to the true God, creator of heaven and earth." A murmur swept the chamber. Some gasped at her boldness, others shivered in fear. The governor's face darkened. To be defied was one thing. To be mocked by a child before the tribunal was unbearable. He rose from his seat, his cloak heavy with rage. "You dare challenge Rome?" he thundered. "You dare scorn its gods?" But Eulalia did not move. Her hands were small, but steady. Her lips trembled, not with fear, but with holy fire. The soldiers seized her. The crowd surged forward, drawn by a cruel hunger. What would become of this child who had shamed Rome? No lash had yet fallen. No flame had yet touched her skin. Yet in that moment, Rome itself felt wounded. For the pride of the empire was challenged by the defiance of a single child. The command was given, and soldiers dragged Eulalia forward. Her small feet scraped across the stones, leaving faint trails of blood where sharp pebbles bit into her skin. She stumbled, yet she did not cry out. The crowd pressed closer, eager to see what the governor would do. Dacian's voice thundered across the chamber. "Strip her of her cloak. Let all see this rebel for what she is." The soldiers obeyed. The wool fell to the floor, leaving the child bare before the idols of Rome. But she lowered her eyes not in shame, but in prayer. "Offer incense," the governor said once more, "or suffer the fate you choose for yourself." Eulalia raised her head. "Burn me if you will," she replied. "Christ is my incense, and my life belongs to him." Fury twisted the governor's face. "Then let her body feel what her soul defies. Begin." The first torment came swiftly. Sharp iron hooks were brought forth, their edges cruel and glinting in the torchlight. The soldiers raked them across her skin. The crowd gasped as lines of red sprang across her arms, her back, her legs. The girl swayed, but her lips whispered prayers that rose above the noise. Again and again the hooks tore at her flesh. Yet no cry escaped her mouth. The governor leaned forward, seeking fear in her face, but found only stubborn fire. "You mock me still?" he demanded. "You bleed, yet you do not yield." Eulalia looked at him, her voice clear though faint. "These wounds are but blossoms. Each drop of blood is a seed for the faith of Christ." The crowd stirred uneasily. Even some soldiers faltered in their duty. For how could a child speak thus, while enduring pain no man would bear? The tormentors turned to the next cruelty. They brought forth burning torches, their flames hungry and bright. They pressed them to her sides, to her shoulders, to her face. The smell of singed flesh filled the air. But still Eulalia did not scream. Instead she lifted her gaze to the heavens above the tribunal hall. "Lord," she whispered, "these flames light my way to you. The fire you send is gentler than this fire of men." The governor grew restless. Her silence, her defiance, wounded his pride more than her words. He struck the arm of his throne with his hand. "Crush her spirit. Make her an example." And so they devised yet another torment. They bound her to a wooden frame, her arms stretched wide like a cross. They brought molten lead and poured it across her wounds. The crowd cried out in horror as smoke rose from her skin. But still Eulalia prayed, her voice steady despite her suffering. "Do you not see," she said to her tormentors. "You pour fire on this body of clay. But the soul within burns brighter, beyond your reach." Some in the crowd began to weep. Others muttered that such cruelty shamed Rome more than it punished the girl. But the governor silenced them with a glance. His pride demanded victory, no matter the cost. At last, Eulalia's strength wavered. Her knees bent, her head dropped forward. The soldiers thought she would faint, but suddenly she lifted her face again. Her eyes shone like embers in the darkness. "You may cut my flesh, burn my skin, pour fire upon me," she declared. "But you cannot take Christ from my heart. I am his, and nothing you do can change it." The tribunal trembled with her words. And though her body was broken, her spirit towered above Rome itself. The governor's patience was ending. Her words, her silence under pain, her fiery eyes, all of it struck him as rebellion, not from a child, but from an enemy of Rome. He rose from his seat, his cloak sweeping the steps like a storm cloud. 13 torments shall answer your 13 years, he declared. And each one will teach you the power of the empire you defy. The soldiers dragged her across the tribunal floor. They bound her to a pillar in the open square, so that all could witness her fate. The crowd pressed closer, their breath misting in the cold air. Some came in cruelty, eager for spectacle. Others came in sorrow, drawn by pity for the child. The next torment began. Sharp whips studded with bone tore across her shoulders. Each strike left crimson trails upon her back. The rhythm of lashes echoed against the stone walls, a dreadful drum of suffering. But Eulalia's lips moved still, shaping prayers that rose higher than the whip's crack. Her tormentors, angered, forced her down upon the frozen stones. They rolled her across thorny branches, the cruel thistles cutting her flesh. Blood mixed with dust beneath her. Yet she whispered, "This crown of thorns is lighter than his." Another torment followed. They pressed heated iron against her chest. The hiss of burning flesh silenced even the loudest voices in the crowd. Eulalia shuddered, her body failing, but her eyes did not close. "Lord," she murmured, "you carried the cross. I carry this fire." The governor turned away for a moment, unsettled. This was no ordinary prisoner, no ordinary trial. But pride ruled him more than reason. He ordered the guards to scour her with scourges tipped in lead. Each blow struck bone as well as flesh. Each blow shook her fragile frame. Yet still she did not yield. "Why do you endure?" one soldier whispered to her, though the others could not hear. "You are a child. Just speak the words, and it will end." Eulalia turned her head weakly. "Because Christ endured for me," she answered. "And so I endure for him." The soldier lowered his gaze in silence. Another torment was prepared. They brought forth pitch and wax, melted together, and poured it over her hair, her shoulders, her open wounds. The sticky fire clung to her skin, searing every nerve. The smell filled the square, and even the wind could not carry it away. But Eulalia's voice lifted above the horror. "These flames are but the gateway to his light." Dacian clenched his fists. Her defiance wounded him more than any blade. He sought not only her death, but her submission. And submission she would not give. At his order, they brought iron brands, glowing from the fire. They pressed them against her sides, against her stomach, against her feet. The marks sizzled, but her spirit did not. She cried once, not in despair, but in triumph. "Christ lives. And in him I shall live forever." The people murmured among themselves. Some wept openly. Others cursed the governor under their breath. For they saw not the humiliation of a rebel, but the glory of a martyr. Thus the torments continued, one after another, as if Rome itself wished to exhaust its cruelty. But the child endured. Her voice faltered at times, but never broke. Her body bent under pain, but her soul stood tall, like a flame that could not be smothered. And though the count of her tortures rose, still she clung to her God. 13 trials would she endure, and through each one, Rome would lose more of its power. For every lash, every flame, every wound revealed not her weakness, but the weakness of her persecutors. And the governor knew, though he would not speak it aloud, that he was no longer in control. The tribunal belonged not to him, but to the girl who defied the gods of Rome. The governor's fury had become desperation. No torment had bent her will. No fire had silenced her prayers. The crowd, once eager for spectacle, now looked upon him with unease. For the more he punished the child, the greater her glory grew. "Bring the iron wheel," he commanded at last. The executioners obeyed. They brought a wooden frame fixed with sharpened blades. The device was meant to tear the body as it turned, a punishment reserved for the worst of criminals. And now, it was prepared for a child of 12. The soldiers bound her small body upon the frame. The blades bit into her skin as the wheel turned slowly. Her blood dripped onto the stones. Yet her face remained lifted toward the sky. She whispered, "Lord, receive me. My body is in their hands, but my soul is yours." The wheel creaked and groaned, but it did not break her spirit. At last, the governor ordered oil to be poured across her wounds, and the wheel set aflame. Smoke rose in black columns. The fire crackled and roared. The crowd gasped as the flames leapt upward, as if to consume the child entirely. But then something wondrous happened. A sudden wind swept through the square. The flames that should have devoured her were blown back, flaring outward against the soldiers themselves. The people cried out that heaven had intervened. Dacian shouted in rage, but the miracle could not be denied. Eulalia's bonds were loosed, whether by the hands of men or by the unseen hand of God. She sank to her knees upon the scorched stones. Her body was broken, yet her eyes still shone with unyielding light. Her lips moved once more in prayer. Christ, I come to you. My sufferings are ended. The governor, seeing her strength still unbroken, gave his final command. End it now. A soldier stepped forward with a blade. But before it could strike, Eulalia's head fell gently to her chest. Her spirit had already fled to the God she loved. At the moment of her death, another sign appeared. A white dove rose from her mouth and flew upward into the winter sky. The crowd gasped, for in the ancient world the dove was the sign of the soul's peace. The governor himself trembled, though he tried to hide it. And then snow began to fall. Soft flakes drifted down from the heavens, covering the girl's wounded body. The whiteness hid her blood, as if nature itself wrapped her in a garment of purity. Some whispered it was Christ's own cloak, laid upon his servant. Others said the snow was a rebuke from heaven, shaming the cruelty of men. The square grew silent. The soldiers stepped back in awe. The crowd, once eager for torment, now wept. Even those who had mocked her bowed their heads. For they had seen not a death, but a triumph. Eulalia's body was taken by the faithful and laid to rest with honor. Her tomb became a place of pilgrimage, where prayers were whispered and miracles were said to follow. Her name spread through Hispania, through Gaul, through all of Christendom. The girl who endured 13 torments became a saint of the Church. And Rome, though it sought to silence her, had only given her voice to the ages. The square of Emerita Augusta did not forget that day. The snow that fell upon her body melted, but the memory remained like fire in the hearts of the faithful. They whispered of the dove that had flown heavenward. They whispered of the miracle of the flames, turned back by the wind. And most of all, they whispered of the child who had endured 13 torments without fear. Her companions carried her broken body away in secret. They washed her wounds with tears more than with water. They laid her in a simple tomb beyond the walls of the city. Above her grave they set no monument at first, for fear of the governor's wrath. But they gathered there in silence, lighting candles, praying for strength to endure their own trials. The governor Dacian departed, his heart darkened. He had won nothing. The child had slipped through his hands, her spirit rising beyond his reach. Rome's law had broken her body, but her courage had broken his pride. He left Mérida in shame, though none dared speak it aloud. Years passed, and the memory of Eulalia grew. Pilgrims came to her tomb by night, carrying little lamps of clay. They touched the stones with trembling hands. Some spoke of healing, others of visions. The faithful believed that the girl saint heard their prayers. When the persecutions ended, her name was no longer whispered in secret but sung openly in churches. Hymns were written of her courage. Priests spoke of her as a lamb who defied the wolf. Children learned her story, finding in her example the courage to resist false gods. In time, her tomb was adorned with flowers, with silver lamps, with carved marble. The faithful built a basilica above her resting place, so that all might come to honor her. Emerita Augusta became a city of pilgrimage, where voices from many lands gathered to remember the child martyr. Her fame spread beyond Hispania. Merchants carried her story across the Pyrenees, into Gaul. Sailors told of her in distant harbors. And soon another city, far to the east, claimed her as its patroness. Barcelona raised her name, saying that Eulalia had appeared there in vision, protecting its people in times of need. Thus 2 Eulalias were remembered, of Mérida and of Barcelona, but both were one spirit, one witness, one martyr. And in every land, the story was the same, a child of 12, who defied the emperor, who endured 13 torments, who triumphed through death. Her cult became a shield for the weak, a warning to the proud. The empire that once tried to erase her now found churches rising in her honor. Her image was painted on walls, carved in stone, carried in processions. In her hand she bore the palm of martyrdom, at her feet the snow, and above her head the white dove of her soul. Centuries later, poets would sing of her in Latin verse. Saints would call upon her name in prayer. Kings would build churches to her memory, hoping her courage might strengthen their rule. And common people, children no older than she had been, would whisper her name in the dark, asking her to guard them against fear. Eulalia had died in silence, but her memory became a voice that echoed through the centuries. The might of Rome had passed away, its emperors forgotten, its temples fallen to ruin. But the girl who walked barefoot into the tribunal of Dacian remained immortal. Her defiance lived wherever faith was tested. Her courage lived wherever a soul faced tyranny. Time flowed on, and the empire that once condemned her faded into dust. The statues of Jupiter crumbled, the altars of Mars lay silent, the temples of stone turned to ruins. But the name of Eulalia endured. In every age of trial, her memory returned. When new rulers rose with iron fists, her story was told to the trembling. When the faithful feared, they remembered the child who feared nothing. When mothers prayed for their daughters, they called upon her as protector. And when children heard her tale, they stood straighter, for she was one of their own. Her relics were carried in solemn processions. Candles lit her shrines across mountains and valleys. In Barcelona, the faithful lifted her name with psalms, swearing she guarded their city from storm and sword. In Mérida, pilgrims still touched the stones of her ancient tomb, whispering prayers for courage. The dove that had flown from her lips became her symbol, the sign of the soul unbroken. The snow that covered her body became her shroud of purity. And the number of her torments, 13, was remembered in solemn hymns, as each wound became a jewel in the crown she bore before Christ. Historians wrote her name. Poets sang her defiance. Artists painted her small figure, clothed in white, standing before the might of Rome, unbent. And those centuries passed, the image never dimmed, a barefoot girl, her eyes raised to heaven, daring to shame an empire. For her story is more than the memory of a single martyr. It is a lesson carved into the history of the world. That power built on cruelty is fragile. That a child's courage can outshine the pride of kings. That Rome, with all its legions, all its wealth, all its idols, was shaken by the voice of a girl. The emperors are forgotten. The governor Dacian lies nameless among the ruins of tyranny. But the name of Eulalia is spoken still, in churches, in chapels, in whispered prayers. Her triumph was not in surviving, but in refusing to yield. Her victory was not in life, but in death freely embraced for her God. And so the flame she bore was never extinguished. It burned in the hearts of her people. It spread to distant lands. It glows even now, when her story is told. The amphitheaters stand in silence. The idols are broken. But the memory of the girl who endured 13 torments remains, bright as the snow that fell upon her body, pure as the dove that carried her soul. Saint Eulalia, the child who defied Rome, lives forever. Thank you for watching, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and see you in the next videos.